glad to see you all again. And I'm really excited to talk to you tonight about the roles that we play and our attachments to those roles and how we can perform better, enjoy more, and get more of what we want in our lives through understanding roles. So, if I were to ask you the question, who are you? Tell me who you are. Some people would give me their name. Some would give me their occupation. Somebody would tell me that they were a mother or a father. Some people would talk to me about their hobby. Maybe they love jujitsu, for example. Some of us do. Other people would tell me about their sexuality. You know, so how we identify ourselves in different ways, in a way, frees us, directs our energy, but it also limits us. Does that make sense? So if you're going to think about all the things you could describe yourself as, and you're going to write them down on a paper, it'd be quite a mess because it's everything and nothing, right? So as we understand our roles, we will realize that roles are how your soul meets the world. Okay, so who you are inside expresses itself in the world through your role. So very often we understand that the quality of our questions determine the quality of our lives. So have you ever asked yourself how many roles you do play during a day? Are you ever not playing a role as a mother, a nurse, a chiropractor, a secretary, a personal assistant, a CEO? You know, there's so many things that you're doing all day long. And how often do you shift between them? And if you don't think that the roles you've chosen have affected you, if you've ever been an adult that has moved back into their parents' house for a period, how often do we become very childish and start acting like a horrible teenager again, even if we're 30, right? Everybody's done that. And how many people are mothers and fathers that get their kids back in the house for a while and start noticing that they go from being these well-adjusted, intellectual, fantastic people, and they start acting like they did when they were 14, right? So these roles that we have around us, they're filled with habits, they're filled with attachments, and they're actually quite powerful. So what I would like to do is I would like to talk a little bit about them with you, and I'd like to ask you some specific questions. Last time I gave you techniques, the technique of the green button or taking the win or the soundbite of success, right? So you actually got techniques. This time I want to give you perspective. So how many of us feel that the roles that we're playing in our everyday life are a factor or they are related to our highest goals and ambitions, your highest self? So when you think about yourself in your everyday life, are you living out your highest goals and ambitions, your personal philosophy through what you're doing, or aren't you? And interestingly enough, what you're doing may have absolutely nothing to do with whether you're living yourself out or you're experiencing your highest self or not. So it's never for another person to judge or tell you how you should live. But understanding that you are not limited in your personality, not limited in who you see yourself to be by the fact that you may work in a chiropractic office as a chiropractor, or that you are working as a politician, for example. You know, if you are a CEO of a big company and then you come home and you're going to run your household like the CEO when you have two 4-year-old twin girls running around the house and you're treating them like your employees, how well is that going to go for you? And how identified are you with these things? So I sat my athletes down to to talk to them about their performance. We've just been to the European Championship, and I had 7 of them around me in a circle, and I asked them who there was satisfied with their performance in the European Championship, right? And some of them raise their hand, and some are overcritical to themselves. They may have even won a medal, but they weren't happy, of course. They wanted to be the European champion. Maybe they didn't achieve that, but they still achieved something spectacular. And I had one gentleman that wasn't really feeling like he got what he wanted out of his experience in jiu-jitsu, and he wasn't really there. So I asked him the specific question. So if you were going to define your three major roles in life, what are they? And he's like, oh, well, I'm a student. And I said, yes. And I'm a husband. I'm like, yeah. And I'm a brother. And I'm like, oh, excellent. So you're proud of being a brother. You're proud of being a husband, and you're proud of being a student. And those are very important things in your life. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And I said, okay. And I pointed at one of my European champions, and I said, so what is your what are your three major roles? What are your three primary roles? And she said, competitor, worker, wife. Right? So what I'm getting at here is that I then asked that gentleman, if your competitor identity, if your competitor role is not even in your top three, how can you expect to be a European or world champion? So very many of the things that we're doing where we're demanding very powerful results very often are demanded of ourselves in an unfortunate and unfair way. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you're going to put pressure on yourself to be a world champion, but you can't be bothered to even prioritize being a competitor in your top three. How many people do you think in that ring of 6 or 7 athletes, actually, minus the one gentleman that didn't prioritize the athletics? How many of them do you think had competitor as one of their top three? All of the other ones. All of the other ones. So, am I telling you that you can only have three roles that you play in your life? Absolutely not. In my case, I'm a mentor, I'm a healer, and I'm a competitor, right? But I'm also a husband. You see, it's not that I don't play that role, but what I am also is a person who really prioritizes competition, healing, and mentoring. So I asked my colleague Maudit whether I was living those things out or not, and she said absolutely, 100%. That's basically how I see you. So are you putting your energy into the roles that you really want to play in order to get the most out of your life? So can you tell me if you know what your top three roles are? Raise your hand if you know what your top three roles are in your life. Not very many people are raising their hand, which means that you've come to the right place. I'm very happy you're here tonight, right? So we're going to try to work through a little bit of how you can figure this out. Now, is there a difference between what you think your major role in your life is and what you actually prioritize? So if you see yourself as a worker and you're running out the door and you have 10 minutes to get there, get to work, and it's a 10-minute drive, do you stop to fold laundry on the way out the door, or do you jump in the car and drive? Right? Are you gonna just quick clean the kitchen before you get in the car and drive, even though you're late? Or are you gonna get in the car and drive and get there on time so that you can do your work? Who has ever caught themselves doing low priority things when they should be doing something high priority? Raise your hand. So what we see here is that we have a limited number of minutes in the day, and we have a limited amount of things that we can do. So if you're focusing your energy on things that are low priority in your life, can you actually expect high performance? There's a woman in America called Mary Kay. If you've ever seen Mary Kay Cosmetics, the way she sorted out her life was that, and she's a multi millionaire, by the way. Um, she sorted her life out in the way that every day when she started her breakfast, she would write a list of things. And in that list of things, she would prioritize the top 4 things that she needed absolutely positively had to get done that day. So as those things were being done, if the other things that were lower priority didn't get done, she would keep them on the list. But again, the next day she would write down what would be important and arrange them in relationship to how high a priority they were. And some of these things never got done because she knew they should be done, but they weren't a priority. Do we live our life putting out fires and running from one random thing to the other that we just see could be done? Or do we organize ourselves and decide what we want for ourselves? Okay? So these rules or these roles that we play are kind of like gloves. Who you are is what you is like your hand going into a glove. Okay? Sometimes we love the roles that we play so much that we have a hard time letting go of them when they're no longer useful. Like I said, if you're a CEO at work and you come home and you have twin 4-year-old girls running around the house and you're going to try to discipline them like you or deal or negotiate with them like you do a business partner or an employee, you probably have problems, right? Same thing when you put your hand in a glove. If you can't get your hand out of the glove sometimes, it's going to get hot and sweaty during the summer. So my question is, sweaty hands, are you attached to your role so you can't drop one of them to go to the next one? So if I'm a competitor in jiu-jitsu, but then I'm going to be the competitor while I'm treating my patients in my clinic, is that an issue? And if I'm concerned with my opponent's health while I'm fighting in the way that a healthcare practitioner is that an issue for my competition? Absolutely, right? So I always like to think of myself, oh, do I have sweaty hands now or don't I? Right? So each one of the roles that you pick for yourself have to be like a glove that you put your hand in, and your hand has to fit the glove. Not only that, I'll come back to that in just a minute. But if you were to write down on a piece of paper what your highest goals and ambitions are for your life, and then try to figure out what roles you have to play in order to make that happen. So for example, you want an education. So you have to play the role of a student. You want a chiropractic practice. Well, then you have to play the role of a chiropractor. Is that correct? Yeah, you want to become a world champion in jiu-jitsu, you have to play the role of a jiu-jitsu competitor. It sounds very easy, except that most of us have never thought about what roles we actually play. We're just kind of making things happen, entertaining ourselves, and then we ask ourselves, we look back at 2020. Many people didn't really feel they got what they wanted out of 2020. Did you make yourself better? Were you able to move forward in the way you see yourself? Were you able to move forward in the way you efficiently move through your life? Have you built something for yourself? And do you realize that you have the potential to build almost whatever you want? You can't be everything, but you can be almost anything, right? So when I talk about the hand in the glove, the roles that we play, sometimes you're going to find a glove to put your hand in, a role that you want to play that just doesn't fit you, right? So let me tell you a story about my biking adventure. So I had a friend who was a triathlete, and he basically was sponsored by a biking company, and he got a bike that was worth $7,000. He got 3 of them actually, and one of them he'd only used twice, and he gave it to me as a present. And he said, there's only one issue here. One thing I'm going to demand from you. You have to join the biking club and you have to bike at least twice a week. And I'm like, man, no problem. I said, well, how many hours a week do you cycle? And he said, well, you should be asking me how many hours a day. And I said, well, what, one? And he's like, more. I said, well, two? He's like, no, man, more. I'm like, 3 hours a day you bike? And he's like, about that, sometimes more. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he's a professional triathlete, right? So I got the bike and I was like, okay, I'm going to show this guy that I can be good. So I decided to become a very strong competitor in biking. Now, I went all in. I had the gear. Man, I lifted and I ate right for biking. I completely changed my body. I lost all the muscle mass on my upper body. My legs were giant. But if any of you have actually met me in person, am I a small person? Am I a light person? No, I'm not, right? I'm pretty big. So I'm probably around 100 kilos. So when I'm fighting in jiu-jitsu, I fight at minus 100 kilos. Well, in this instance, I was trying to cut my weight to get better following these guys in the hills. And I think I was 94 kilos. And that's with no muscle mass to speak of in my upper body. Because it seemed like all the muscle disappearing on the top would end up on my legs. And I came over some research that showed me that the steepest hill in the Tour de France, not that you were going to win it, but if you were just going to hang with the guys that are cycling that, not the fastest, but just cycling at the normal pace. If you were 86 kilos, you would have to be stronger in your legs than the Olympic champion in strength, the gold medalist in powerlifting, in order to hold the speed. If you were under 85 kilos, it was possible, but you had to be really strong. And the best ones were at 60, 65 kilos. Now, can you imagine me at 65 kilos? If you think I'm 100 kilos now, you'd have to cut my body in half, okay? I wouldn't have arms. I don't know what I could do to get down to that weight. And then I realized that the glove that I was trying to wear there did not fit me. There was no way that I was going to change my body enough to fulfill that role. So my question to you, are there some roles in your everyday life that you're fulfilling now that really don't fit you? Are there some gloves in your life that you should be taking off? So what I did is after I read the research, I very swiftly sat myself down and started thinking about my friends and how I was going to tell them that I was stopping the competitions in cycling. And yes, I did compete in cycling, by the way. And no, it didn't go very well. Okay, but I knew I had it in me. I knew I had the force of winning inside me, and so do you. Anything that you can conceptualize and believe in, you can achieve to a certain point. So the things that I would have to do in order to make myself win in cycling weren't actually worth what I would have to sacrifice, were they? So I just decided the glove didn't fit me, and I found another glove, which happened to be jiu-jitsu. And I became much more healthy. I found my path. And that's in a way similar to finding your true talents in life, is to finding the role that will support you in expressing who you are in the world. So in being a person who is not prioritizing the role that supports your highest goal and ambition, can you still put lots of energy in that thing and not be successful? Meaning that my friend who was doing jiu-jitsu competitions that didn't have competitor as one of his top 3 roles, do you think he was training hard? Yes. Was he training correctly? Yes. Was he doing everything he could? Absolutely. But where the rubber hits the road is, if he had to cut out in order to be a husband, and he had to choose being a husband over competition training, then that competition training left. If he had a test to study for, do you think he would go to competition training and get exhausted, or would he study for his exams? He would study for his exams. If his brother called and needed to talk because he's 15, 16 years old at that time and loved his big brother, would he stepped out of training to talk to his brother. Absolutely. Now, you wouldn't think that that would have a large effect in the long run, but it does something to you. Not that it's a bad thing because he was still living up to his priorities, but he was putting in 80% of the work that he needed in order to become truly excellent in jiu-jitsu, but not getting any results because the guys he was meeting in competition were probably putting 82% or 88%, and some of them were putting in 95%, 100%, right? Because maybe they only have one thing in their whole life, which is jiu-jitsu. And that's why commonly athletes from very poor neighborhoods or very poor cultures do very well in fight sports, is because they have one way out. They have boxing, they have wrestling, right? Or they have basketball. They only have one way out, which means what is their role? So they put all of their eggs in one basket, of course, and really, really push. Now, I feel sorry for them if that glove doesn't fit their hand, but that's the way it is. So, what I want you guys to do now, after the podcast is over, the webinar, sorry, I'd like you to sit down and I would like you to really write through what you feel that your roles, your three major roles are in your life. What are you actually prioritizing? So if I tell you that I want to be a jiu-jitsu fighter, but I'm playing video games 7 hours a day and I'm not sleeping enough and I'm not eating, am I actually doing the job of being an athlete or not? That's a good question, right? So if I say that, oh, I want to be an excellent husband, but how many times today did you actually meet your wife's eyes? How many times did you tell her that you appreciate the things she does? How many times were you grateful for what she is and how she is? Look at the roles that you're playing and start to feel whether or not you're filling those up as best as you can. Now, there's an old story from America, and we have a saying, fill up your present place. And I usually use Maudit for this example because she does this very much. I asked her, so what do you want to what's your major thing? And she said, well, I have many major things, but one of them is to be a worker. I really want to be a worker. And I said, well, what kind of worker? Do you want to run a business? Do you know, how do you want to do things? What do you mean worker? And she says, I don't know. I can work anywhere, but I just want to make sure I'm the best possible worker. And to be quite honest, she's the only person that's ever worked with me that I've seen constant and never ending improvement, even after third and fourth year. If you run a business or you work with other people, generally people learn the job after 6 months and maybe they get a little better after a year, but after that they stagnate. And why is that? Because the hand fits the glove enough. But she's constantly finding ways to expand the glove. And interestingly enough, the next glove shows up for her. The next opportunity comes. And this thought came originally from a black man in the South that had been arrested. And they were basically pounding rocks to make gravel. And the sheriff saw that this guy would break more rock and make more gravel than all the other prisoners. So over time, he realized that this was a quality worker. And then he asked the guy, hey, do you want to be the foreman of this gang? And he said, absolutely, I can be the foreman. And then his gang was the most efficient gang. So he filled up his spot there, right? So in the next period, when he was leaving the prison because he had served his sentence, he knew all of the prison guards, he knew all of the other prisoners, and everybody respected him, and he got things done. The sheriff owned a grocery store, and he asked him, would you like to come work for me in my grocery store? And that's not very often that a sheriff or a prison um, deputy will ask a prisoner to work for him. But he showed up and he did a great job there too. He really filled up his present place. He was there and he did the little extra, and he did what he could to make sure that everything worked well. And as the old man who ran the grocery store was starting to get a little older, he asked, would you like to be the boss? Would you like to run the store for me? which the guy said, yes, I would like to run it for you. So he was the first African American daily leader for a grocery store in the South. And after the old man died, the widow sold it to him. And in the next 10 years, he ended up having over 100 stores. He was the first African American in the South to be a multi-millionaire. Now, do you think that when he was swinging the sledgehammer in the beginning that he thought that he was going to be able to do that? That was in his mind? Absolutely not. And that's what I'm saying, my friends. If you don't have a very concrete idea of what your role is going to be, or what you really want, or something that's going to fulfill your highest goals and ambitions, then fill up your present place where you are. Be spectacular at whatever you're doing. And the next love will show up for you. That's happened in my own life, and I get to watch it all the time in Modest Life. And it's one of those great principles to live by. So if you don't necessarily have a good overview of what your highest goals and ambitions are, and I are going to be putting on a workshop around Easter to help you find out what those are. And we're going to be doing basically a relatively exclusive workshop to help you dissect the things that you want from the inside and make them happen on the outside. It's going to be a fantastic thing. I can't wait for that.